what is that? If you want to just give a layman's description of what the Septuagint is, what would you say?
Yeah, that's kind of the most important starting point. There's a few different ways you can define it, but sort of the easiest is to think of it as a stream of translational activity. Because there's no, like, if you go back to the ancient world, there's no like Amazon that has a Septuagint to buy like you can today. And if you're going to buy one, buy the Reader's edition from Gregory R. Lanier and William A. Ross. But that really didn't exist. But what you do have is various groups of people translating the Hebrew of the Old Testament into what had become the vernacular of the day, starting roughly in 200 BC with the first 5 books, and then it was a long process to kind of finish it all out. So it's essentially a translation of the Hebrew text into what had become the lingua franca of the day, namely Greek. And so it's similar in spirit to the fact that we have English Bibles or Spanish Bibles today, all of which go back to either the Hebrew Old Testament or the Greek New Testament. This is a translation of the Hebrew Old Testament into the language that the world was speaking in its day, because most had moved on from Hebrew, because it was under Alexander the Great and his successors, the world kind of converted to Greek. So
you're saying this, it's not like one translation.
It started out that way. That's where it gets nuanced.
Okay.
So strictly speaking, you can use the term Septuagint for the original Greek Pentateuch, because that was what was translated first.
First 5 books.
First 5 books. And that probably was a small team effort in a relatively small amount of time, most likely. So if you want to say something is the Septuagint, you would call that the Septuagint. But Septuagint became a label for really what is kind of a family of translational activities, really, that took a long time, and a lot of different people, some in Egypt, maybe others elsewhere, working their way through the different books, and in fact, editing books in different, like once you have a translation of one of the books, it didn't just sort of stay put. Sometimes they say, they would correct it and start saying, well, I need to make it better. And so you even have editing activity over time too. So it just makes it all complex. So for us, we would say, okay, it's basically like a river. It's a coherent river, but it has tributaries and different spinoffs, and it's lots of people over a long period of time fundamentally taking the Hebrew Bible and putting it into Greek. And then even editing that and changing that. And there's 2 versions of Daniel and blah, blah, blah. There's some complexity, but that's essentially what we're talking about. It's no different than you could sort of say there's the English translation river, right?
Sure.
That started with like Tyndale and so forth, and has different tributaries, but there is kind of, here's a bunch of different English translations that are all in English Bible from the Hebrew and Greek. And so Septuagint is kind of like that, just in Greek.